What's good, everyone? My name is Char, and today I got an exciting data table tutorial for you. So, in the event that you ever want to have a broad overview of the stats of in your game for different weapons or for different characters, or if you just simply want to be able to collaborate with a designer, and the designer doesn't interfere with anything you're programming, well, then data tables are the perfect solution for you. So, pretty much what data tables do is they contain a bunch of data that you can then use to modify stats. So in this case, we just saw we had the default speed. Well, let's go ahead and up the speed here in the data table for the default values. And what's going to happen is now the speed of the character is sped up. And you can also have different scenarios or different weapon types or whatever for different rows that have different stats on them. In this tutorial, we're just going to have three different types. We're going to have the default stats, and then we're going to have like quote-unquote hardcore stats if this is Dark Souls, and then we have funny stats, which are just kind of funny Fall Guys-esque stats, low gravity, whatever. And you're pretty much able to just change between these different stat tables. So for example, if we go to funny has less gravity, and we're just able to jump really high and fall really, really slow. And yeah, all of this is changed through a data table, and without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so we're going to start with the third-person template, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a data table that allows you to modify the player character and their movement. So pretty much in this scenario, we have our good old movement, and I want to be able to fine-tune this to make it feel fun to play. So that's precisely what we're going to do. And in this scenario, we are on a team project, and I'm the engineer, I'm a coder. I want to be able to code maybe a shoot function while the designer has the ability to still modify the player movement and fine-tune it to a way of their liking, and they don't have to bother me by preventing me from being able to work, because Unreal is very funny with source control. So that's one of the great use cases with data tables, in addition to also you having a great overview of all the different stats for maybe different classes or different types of enemies. So let's get started on how to get this done. So to begin with, just some folder structure stuff. Let's go ahead and create a new folder in the content folder, and let's call this data tables. And the reason why we're creating this in the general content folder and why we're not putting this inside a blueprints folder is because data tables can be accessed by multiple kind of team game development. Data tables can be accessed and can be used by all the different professions. They can be used by engineers, they can be used by artists, they can be used by designers. The main purpose of data tables, from my experience, has been just designers being able to modify stats without having to interfere with engineering work. But also they have uses with artists. So for example, maybe you want to have different possibilities for looks of enemies, then a data table can be really good to kind of build out the enemies and how they look. So perhaps one variation of enemies should have red pants and a blue shirt, or another variation of enemies should have blue shirt and blue pants. Data tables can be used in different ways to modify the game in runtime and modify stats in runtime. But in this example, we're just going to modify the player movement stats. So the first thing we're going to go ahead and do is inside this folder, we're just going to create a data table for the player. So we're just going to create a player folder. If you have AI and other stuff, you can create AI folders, etc. Inside player, we are going to create our data table. Now, data table needs one thing before we can create a data table. It needs a structure, because the structure is how the data table formats itself into a way that we can pull data from. So what is a structure? Real quick, a structure is it's a group of data. It's a data wrapped together into an object type or a variable type. So the most common structure that you've probably used is a vector. So if we were to split the structure pin of a vector is made up of three floats. So all a vector is, it's just three floats wrapped together into one variable. So a vector is a structure. And another common structure or another common structure, as I should say, is a rotator. A rotator is also just 3 floats wrapped together into a structure. And also a transform is a structure of a vector, a rotator, and a scale. So structures can have other structures in them. I know, this gets complicated real quick, but for our purposes, our structure is going to be very simple. It's just going to be 3 floats, because all we're going to be modifying is the speed, the jump height, and the gravity. So let's go ahead and start doing that. So let's go back to our data tables, and let's go into our player, and let's go ahead and go to Blueprint, and we're going to click this button called Structure. Now the prefix for created structures, at least the way I do it, is I call it struct. And the reason why I do this is so that way it's easier to find whenever you create a data table. So we're going to type in struct underscore player stats. Now once we've made the structure, we're going to double click to open it, and the first thing you want to do is you want to press this button. When you press this button, it's going to basically let you build out your structure. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a jump height variable. So let's call this jump height. And let's make this of type float. Then let's create a speed. So let's call it speed. Again, type float. And then let's create a gravity scale. So let's just call this gravity scale. And let's make this, again, of type float. So what we've done is we've effectively created 3 different floats, and we can then pull data from this. And then finally, just as a little thing, let's say, for example, our character should say hello at the beginning of the game. Let's just call this hi, and let's make this a Boolean. Now, if we go to our default values, what we'll notice is pretty much all of these are set to 0. And this is totally fine. You can modify these in the data table just well. But as a great quality of life, it's nice to put some default values into your default values section. So that way there is some sense of, oh, this is quote unquote the normal stats. And because of that, whenever you create new rows in your data table, maybe for new enemies, or maybe for new weapons, you kind of have that baseline of how a weapon, what's like the baseline of a weapon, and then you're able to kind of shift it in a way that kind of gives it its own identity. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's just go ahead and create, let's say our jump height's 1,000, and our default speed is 600, and our gravity scale is 1. And by default, let's be nice. Let's say by default we want to say hi. So what we're going to do is, now that we've created our structure, we're then going to go ahead and right-click inside our player data table folder, and we're just going to go down to miscellaneous, and we're going to create a data table asset itself. And now the first thing it's going to do whenever you click it is it's going to ask you to pick a row structure. Now, the reason why, again, I put the prefix in front of the structure for player stats is because there's a lot of engine default structures that can kind of get you lost, and especially if you use common names like, for example, stats or events or row, or there's a lot of things that are common in the engine. So if you accidentally, say for example, have something that you want to make a structure for that is a common thing in the engine, then your structure is going to get lost in a bunch of other structures. So it's just as good practice. It's great to put struct in front of your created structures, so that way you can find your created structures and differentiate them from engine defaults. So let's go ahead and type in struct player stats. We're going to click that, and then we're going to press OK. And that's going to create a data table based on this structure. So prefix for data tables is dt underscore, then followed by whatever you want to call it. In our case, we're going to call this player stats. And we're going to double click to open it. Now it's going to give us this blank screen, and the first thing you want to do is you want to press add. And what's going to happen is it's going to create a row for us. And the default name for new rows is new rows. And if there is if you were to add more and there was a new row, then it's just simply going to add a suffix number. So this is new row underscore 0, new row underscore 1. And the reason why it does this is because there cannot be any duplicate row names. That is simply impossible, and is also in general just bad practice. So we're just going to go ahead and create our default stats. So let's double click the row name, and let's just call this default. And these are our default stats right here, which is great. So by default, our jump height in the third-person character, by default for character movement, is not is not 1,000, nor is the gravity scale 1. In fact, in the third-person template, interestingly, the gravity scale is only 1.75. So, pretty much, so if we were to play the game right now without anything attached, this is what moving the player around looks like. So now let's pretty much fetch our data from the data table. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to get this handy function called get data table row. And get data table row takes two inputs. The first and most vital one is the data table asset. In this case, it's going to be dt_player stats. Now, if you don't have anything being input into the row name, it'll give you a drop down of all the different row names. That being said, though, if in your case you're allowing a player to select a weapon in like an inventory screen, the row name will be based off whatever the weapon name is. So say for example you were to go back here, you would basically create a row for each of the different weapons and you would give it the weapon name. And then you can do some string logic and manipulation to effectively, figure out, oh, what is my weapon name, and then get the stats from the row. But anyways, we're just going to stick to this. We have default right now. And what we're going to do is we're just going to get the out row and we're going to type in break, and this will break our structure. So we got our jump height, our speed, our gravity scale, and whether or not we should say hi in the beginning of the game. So what we're going to do is we're just going to get the character movement, since we're modifying the character movement, and jump height is jump velocity, jump set jump z velocity. Plug that in there into row found, and we're just going to put the jump height in there. Then what we're going to do is we're going to modify the max walk speed. So set max walk speed, and we're going to set that to our speed. And finally, we're going to modify our gravity scale. So we're going to get out here, set gravity scale, and we're just going to set that to whatever gravity scale is. And then finally, whether or not we should say hi. This is a boolean I created inside of the player character. I'm just going to go drag that into here. And the logic for whether or not I should say hi is present over here at the end of begin play. I just simply do a branch and then print string hello. So now that we've equipped that there, as you can see, hello gets printed now. Our jump height is way higher and our gravity scale is noticeably lower. So yeah, now the data table is actively modifying our stats. And here's the great part. If we were to go back into here and modify, let's say for example, I think I should move faster. Well, let's change the speed to 900. Whenever I play the game again, this automatically runs all over again. Now I'm moving noticeably faster. And that is how powerful, and that's one of the great powers of the data table, is that you're just able to easily and seamlessly modify stats in this viewer right here. And you don't have to go inside the actual code itself and modify variables like, oh, what is my jump height? Or, oh, how much damage should I do with my gun? Or how many rounds per second should my gun shoot? That kind of things. Those things you don't have to worry about. So yeah, and also another thing too is if you create a new row, let's say for example, let's make a hardcore stat. So this is like more Dark Souls-esque, so let's make the jump height like, I don't know, 400. And let's make our speed like 300. And then let's make our gravity scale 2 for the jokes. And we don't say hi because this is Dark Souls, because, it's a cruel world out there. So now, the thing we have to do, forgot to do that, is we go back to our construction script, we change our row name to hardcore, and now it reads the stats of hardcore. So now we move slower, and now we don't jump as high, and also gravity is not on our side. So yeah, that's pretty much that's pretty much data tables in a nutshell. And just as a quick example of like a data table system that's more robust and is more active within the engine, this is actually a data table system I've been using on a project I've been working on with 4 other friends. And this is basically our challenge system. So the designer in my friend group, what he did is he basically defined all of these challenges. And then I created this UI widget that effectively just grabs a random, it uses this function called get data table row names. It just grabs it basically ensures that we don't have a duplicate challenge. And then we just simply get a random, we get a random name for the rows. And then we just simply build out a challenge. And thus, if we keep on compiling this, the challenge part on the bottom updates during runtime, but as you can see, the names and the rewards will constantly update, as well as the number of challenges that are present. And all of that is defined within the challenge. And when I talked earlier about how structures can be inside of structures, the struct challenge structure actually has a struct challenge notation. What's it called? Has a struct challenge notation array inside of it, and also has a challenge reward structure inside of it as well. So if we go into the default values of this, we have reward and reward type, all that stuff. So yeah, there again, data tables are very robust as well as structures, and you can do some really interesting and good things, such as this challenge system. And if you would like me to do a tutorial on this challenge system, do let me know. I'd be more than happy to show off how to do it. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Peace.